folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show, coming on Power Talk. Thank you so much for making us part of your day today. And my show revolves around the 4 L's: leadership, love, life, which is overcoming adversity, and the lineage of all musics. And I get a chance today to speak to somebody who's been making a living playing music on the bandstand and in the studio for the last half century. He has dealt with good leadership and bad. He has definitely come to different levels of understanding of what love is. He's overcome a lot of adversity in his life, as we all have, to make himself a stronger musician and person. And quite frankly, when you listen to him playing, whether it's on the organ or a myriad of different keyboards, you just get the feeling that he's awash in all musics and that he comes from the Duke Ellington School, that it is all music, and that labels and names have really gotten in the way of our ability to create communal spiritual music. People want to pigeonhole things today and brand things, and we've gotten to a point now in our society where you can go to a blues festival and there's not one black band, or you go to a jazz festival and there's just a bunch of R&B bands. So we're a little bit lost, but then seeing a live performance a couple weeks ago at the Capitol Theater with Joe Russo and Phil Lesh and Josh Kaufman, Stuart Bogey, and my guest, revitalizes the spirits and gets the creative juices flowing again and really lets the body dance. Benmont, Tench, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
It is a pleasure to be here, man. I agree with everything that you said, not about me, but about
hey, man, that's the thing. Go ahead. You just riff away.
The Phil show was the first show I've done since the lockdown, since COVID.
Wow.
And it was a good way to come back.
I'll say. I mean, how did that even? Can I ask you how you are affiliated with that conglomeration of cats? I mean, have you known Phil for a while?
I met Phil 3 years ago. What birthday was he having? I can't even remember. Maybe 79. 2 or 3 years ago, I went to the Capitol. I went to the Cap, and I played it with Phil. They called up and said, would you like to play a show in Santa Fe? And I couldn't. And they said, would you want to come to the Cap and play 3 nights? And I love the Grateful Dead. I love the song catalog. I love Phil from afar. So I went and did that 2 or 3 years ago. And then they called up and said, do you want to do it again this year? And I jumped at the chance. I jumped at it. You talked to Tom Constantin, and he was talking about, for musicians, music is liquid. It's not something that's frozen on a record.
Yes.
I love records. I love record making. But it's not that. It's alive. It's constantly changing. And to get the chance to play great songs with great musicians and with minimal of rehearsal, so it's in the moment, as in the moment as it can be.
You know, Benmont, I just,
it's a blessing.
I wanted to, we have a game on this program called Name That Voice. I don't expect you to know who it is, but I just thought about you when I heard this. Pay attention to the content, and then we'll come back and break it down.
Okay.
I'm not really sure if it was, if I did learn, because there was a period in the old recordings where bass drums weren't very present in the music. It was always mostly top end of the drum kit.
Mm-hmm.
You're not really. It wasn't until probably the 70s when bass drums got kind of got into the mix, or when they started remastering some of those old sessions, and the drum kit got to be a little bit more full or something like that. But as a kid, I kind of remember hearing the top end of the drums more than I heard the bottom end of them. So I really can't say. I think I got the idea of being close related to the kick drum and leaving the snare drum alone through my session work I did with Alan Toussaint. It was just a strict rule that you don't put a note where the snare drum is. Yeah.
Benmont, you want to take a guess at who that is?
Is that Earl Palmer?
Say again?
Is that Earl Palmer?
Dude, that's a great guess. Unfortunately, Earl left this world before I got a chance to interview him. That was George Porter Jr.
Oh, good Lord!
And this is what I want. Ben,
about the drums. He's
Yeah.
talking about the drums, and I'm listening. I'm going, "Is it James? Is it Earl?" And he said Toussaint. So I thought it was a drummer. I mean, my God, George Porter. Yeah, of course he knows.
Well, no, James Booker. I unfortunately I started my show 10 years ago. These cats have long left this planet, but I really wanted you to talk.
When did Earl pass away? Like 20 years ago.
Yeah, that's a great question. I just know it was, but Benmont, I wanted you to talk a little bit about, regardless of whether you kick pedals or how you developed. To me, what he was talking about with the older recordings, especially the jazz recordings, what I love the most is that the drummers are dancing on the top of the kit, and I don't hear this pulsating double bass drum that became so prevalent as the decades went along. And so and you weren't necessarily listening through pristine audio, and I kind of wanted you to talk about some recordings that you would listen to that in hindsight actually helped you develop your bass line techniques, either in left hand or kicking pedals.
Well, I'll tell you what, I don't play the pedals because I'm really terrible at them.
Yeah, it's hard. It's very hard.
It's too much for me to take on. I admire them in Daylight Saturdays. I got to see Jimmy Smith and sit really up close and see how he worked between the left hand and the pedals. And it was really a delight. Larry Goldings was a genius at it. All these cats. But the dance is essential, and the dance doesn't mean that you don't just play a backbeat. The dance is essential. I mean, mentioned Earl Palmer, he played a backbeat, but the dance was implied in it. The dance was inherent in it. The thing about the top of the kit, I thought that when the 70s showed up, with the exception of the really top-notch people, the way that the kick drum, the sound of the kick drum, the way all of that came into focus, usually didn't sound very good.
I completely agree.
And
that's great.
Drums, for a while, there was this terrible way of recording drums, and they just didn't feel like they were drums or doing the job of drums, rather filling the oral and temporal and I don't know, the space in the ensemble of the palette of colors. And then came disco. And everybody got into this 4-on-the-floor thing. This boom, 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 boom. And it stops dancing. And it stopped, so much of it stopped swinging. Like a lot of the popular music stopped swinging. To me, at least. And rock and roll really stopped swinging. In the 90s, some things came in that were fantastic. Nirvana was wonderful. There were a lot of other bands in the 90s that were really wonderful, but there was also this thing that didn't understand that the Ramones came from Phil Spector records,
right,
and just thought you go da 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 da, and you lost the swing. I have always had to have. I like the dance to come more from if it's the right pianist, or if it's a guitarist like Jerry Garcia, and there is no guitarist like Jerry Garcia. The only person in the league with Jerry Garcia is David Rawlings. This was Billy and Welch. And that's a dance. That's really a dance, and a deeply soulful one. Jazz drummers dance, and Max Roach dances. And it's truly beautiful. It's truly, truly beautiful. I like to dance where I can tell where the groove is. There's a thing, some jazz players can get so deep, and have such a deep understanding of rhythm that they can go far away from where I can tell where the downbeat is. And that, in the right hands, that works for me. But there aren't that many people that do that to where I enjoy it. Steve Ferrone.
Oh my!
Steve
Such
Ferrone.
a good, such a beautiful. My God, the deepest groove,
Isn't
man.
it great? Yeah, I heard when you talked to him.
Yeah.
He, when he joined the band, like Stan Lynch swings like a son of a bitch, and he does beautiful dancing on top of it. And Steve, of course, does all of that too. But we would get these like middle sections, and Tom would break it down and be quiet. And I would, until I got used to playing with Steve, I would kind of look at him with this, like, what the hell are you doing? I'd hold my finger up with just my index finger to like one. Where's the line? and he'd just look at me and go and nod his head and be like, oh, and there it is.
Yeah, right there.
And I'm like, wait a minute. So if the dance gets too far, sometimes I can lose. Sometimes I can stay with it. Sometimes I can't. But if you get a pianist like he's a great boogie piano player and other styles, but Pete Johnson, Tom Constantin talked about Albert Hammond's Need Lex Lewis, Pontop Smith,
Right.
everybody. But Pete Johnson was also part of that gang. He had the Boogie Woogie Trio with Hammond's and Need Lex Lewis, and he dances. His playing just dances, and it's truly beautiful. It dances, but it keeps its roots in a very deep and ancient.
Can you talk about, so, because I mean, for cats that are gonna listen to this today, 50 years from now, they're like, dance. We dance all the time, but it's not EDM pulsating, just pulverizing your body with no space. There's space when you talk about swinging. You're talking about the roundness of the notes. You're talking about like the ability for the music to breathe. There's no space in this in this electronic music, or the way you talked about the way the drums in the 70s were starting to be recorded. And I even from your earliest times, I mean, how did you learn to dance on your instrument? I mean, to me, it was the best thing about when you guys came up. Nothing was quantized. There was no quantized rhythm. It was round. Everything was round. So it was like a ball. I just want you to talk to cats about, when you say dancing, what does that mean to you?
Well, now, look, there are great disco records with Four on the Floor that swing and dance.
Right.
There are great EDM records. I've heard them where there's something about it where it really bloody dances. And Moby has done some stuff that's just lovely. But it's got to have a swing, and the swing is this implied. It's not quantifiable.
Yes,
it's not like you can't put it down to clicks that you can time on a timer. You can time it on a timer. The drummers that are the best in the world that swing like crazy. If you start a metronome at the beginning of a song, and you turn it off and you put it back on at the end of the song, they'll be in the same place. But it's what makes people, in my opinion, it's not just the songs and the singing. I think those songs are what made people go nuts about the Beatles, because Ringo swings.
Yeah.
Ringo bloody swings, and I was doing a session in his house a few years ago, and overdubbing the piano, and he leaned over my shoulder, the playback was loud, and said, "You're forgetting to swing." And, he was right. And I always take that to heart. Don't forget to swing. Just don't forget to swing. It is, I don't know if you can even describe it, but you know it when you hear it. If you hear John Hyatt's version of, what is the opening track? Bonnie Raitt had a big hit with it too. Ricky Starr is also a great drummer. But the John Hyatt version, it opens Bring the Family. Whatever song that is, I want to say it's called Thing Called Love, but I'm not sure about that. But it's Jim Keltner and Nick Lowe for the rhythm section, and Ry Cooder and John Hyatt on guitars. And if you listen to that, you will hear, and you hear it in Bonnie's version too, but in the John Hyatt version, you will hear the dictionary picture of swing, this kind of stutter that gets into the music. this thing that if you listen to AC/DC, Phil Rudd on the drums swings. If you listen to Led Zeppelin, John Bonham absolutely swings because he's not going bum, 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 bum. There is in there, you know that it's actually somewhere in there, even if he isn't playing, it's going dum, 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 dum. It's got a swing. Even if he isn't playing it, it's in his heart and it's in there somewhere. And you've got to have that. And it's not a straight up shuffle. There's the 2-for-2 shuffle. It's like dun, 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 and then put on a record from New Orleans, you know, and then you got it. And once again, listen to Jim Keltner play a shuffle. Listen to Ringo Starr play a shuffle. Then you've got the shuffle, and it's different. You kind of need to.
What is it with? I'm curious about swinging with. I mean, Phil Lesh was an avant-garde. He loved to play trumpet. He would play trumpet on Perry Lane. He was actually like part of the prankster crew. He was the oldest member of the Dead. I love the guy so much. But, you know, the guy, there is no, he does not conform to the average bass player. He's kind of going with the pulse of the music. I just wonder now, being that this was your first gig after COVID, like what was it like to keep that pulse, and what is it like to swing with Phil?
It's beautiful. This gig took me a moment because I hadn't played with musicians. I cut a record and we were cutting live on the floor, but I hadn't like been on stage in front of people playing music that wasn't my own live in 2 years. And that was like a whoa. So the whole thing was an adjustment.
Wow.
I think by the second night, we really had it down. The first night wasn't bad. Phil is the only guy that plays or thinks anything like Phil. I've never heard anybody or encountered anybody who played bass the way Phil Lesh does. And it's really fun.
By the way, I just want to say, like, the first night, in my mind as an audience member, you guys were going for it because it was a little bit off the rails. That's where the best stuff comes in. Anyway, go ahead. Continue.
Yeah, the first night, it was a little bit off the rails, and we reeled it in the second night. And the second night like,
wait, no, but just explain, because, I mean, this explain why it's so fun to play. I mean, Phil, a lot of people get down on Phil because, he's not John Conn. He's just not a traditional pocket player. But in my mind, that's what made the Dead swing. You know, but I just want you to talk about why it's fun to play with him.
Well, if you listen to the Grateful Dead, especially the live recording.
Oh yeah.
You know, that Skull and Roses record that opens with. Does it open with Bertha or does it open with... It opens with Bertha, I think.
Yeah.
It's got that stunning transition from Not Fade Away to Going Down the Road Feeling Bad. Phil leaves so much space in unexpected places. And he has a different sound than many bass players. But he and Kreutzmann make this beautiful swing. And that whole band as a unit makes one rhythm, you know. Anybody isn't there. Bob Weir is essential to the sound of the
Absolutely.
His guitar playing is essential because he finds this place and this tone that is unique in music, and it gives all the space for Jerry to be Jerry, but it still supports the harmonic structure and the rhythm of the song. And Phil, kind of the same. And he's not playing leads like John Entwistle. Penny would always say John Entwistle's lead guitar player in Blue. And it's pretty much true. There was an isolated track of a live performance of Baba O'Reilly on the internet. And it was just John Entwistle's bass, and it was so breathtaking. And Phil isn't that kind of...
I dig, man.
He isn't filling that kind of role. Yeah. But the Dead played in the music, but they also played around the music. And Phil kind of plays around the music. Sometimes it's almost like he's scat singing, mostly slowly scat singing, but scat singing. And it's beautiful because there's rhythmic support coming from Phil, and it was Joey Russo this time. And it's beautiful. But there's also air. And it also kept me listening. It's really fun because it keeps me going, okay, I have a chart because this time it was 48 songs, and I was familiar enough to just go out and play them with maybe 15 of them. Most of them I'd heard, but, I didn't have them down. But it kept me even more in the moment because Phil leaves the room. You don't get boom, 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 which is brilliant. That's done. Good Lord, no dog in the bay. That's not always. But he does a different thing. It's fascinating to me that he puts together these different bands and plays these long shows. He's used Dawes once or twice. And Dawes is a wonderful band, and I'm sorry I didn't get to hear him with Dawes. I can probably find it online somewhere. And the band that we had was an entirely different kind of band. And he puts together these different players, and he goes out and plays his music. And all of these bands find themselves, maybe for the first time, without a bass player that ties into the kick drum.
That's it. You just hit it. You just nailed it.
And you tie into the kick drum can be a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Sure. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But you got to swing and dance around it. That's what Doug Dunn did. And it's really gorgeous the way that Phil does it. It's really gorgeous. But the Rolling Stones too, especially with Wyman. And Keith is also a brilliant bass player. Sympathy for the Devil and a lot of those songs.
Right.
Keith is playing bass. But not most of them. Most of the time it's Bill Wyman. And Wyman knows how to tie in the kick drum. I think he and Petty had a 20-minute conversation once about how to play bass on a Chuck Berry song. Because people go out and play Johnny B. Goode and they go dun 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 dun, and they go boom 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 boom. And what you do is you play it like it's an upright bass.
Wow.
And so they have like a 20-minute conversation about this because Wyman does that too. Wyman gives you the more support of the low end than Phil usually does, but Wyman knows how to dance around it. And I think Don Was told me that I think somebody told me, maybe Don Was, that playing with Charlie Watts, you don't listen to the kick drum, you listen to the vocal. And then all of a sudden it all falls into place.
That's right.
And that's the truth. That's the truth.
That's right.
You listen to the melody, you listen to the vocal, you listen to the melody, you listen to anyone but yourself, especially when you're soloing. And you just let loose. And like Ringo said, don't forget to swing. And the Grateful Dead swung like crazy.
It's like the live show. I mean, the live, and I think a lot of cats. Well, we can go way down this rabbit hole, Benmont. But I really wanted to ask you about like when you first started. Well, it says you met Petty when you were 11 years old or something along those lines.
I saw him around from when I was 11 or 12. Yeah.
Like, was he? It almost gives the impression that you had your stuff together, and I mean, how quickly did you become a professional musician in your career?
I saw Tom. He was working in a music store that I would hang out in. Yeah. He was like 15 or 16. I was 12 or so. And he worked there, so I didn't really talk to him. He was one of the older kids that was over by the counter. And they had passed for long hair at the time in Gainesville, like 1965 or whatever. Wow. So I didn't really talk to them much, but I would go in and play every keyboard in the music store after school every day. And they would let me, probably because the owner thought that I was going to buy one, because my father had once bought me a portable organ there. But they were great, and that's the first I saw Petty. And the next I saw him, I think I was 17, and he had a band called Mudcrutch with one of the other guys that worked behind the counter, a guy named Tom Ledden, and a terrific drummer named Randall Marsh. Petty was playing bass. I got pretty good pretty quick. I think I started taking lessons at 6 or 7, but I really loved it. And I was blessed with a wonderful piano teacher named Isla Weaver. And she had been my father's piano teacher.
Wow.
So she started me off on the kids' books with the little, bum, 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 like these things about, whatever little storyline you can have that the music evokes. And she started with that. But before too long, I said, what are you going to learn next week? She said, what do you like? And I liked the theme to a movie called How the West Was Won. She said, great, I'll order it. We'll learn that. And then not too long after that, I played her what I had learned, and I said, what do you want me to play now? She said, how about you just play off the top of your head? And she said this for like an 8 or 9-year-old kid. And
wow.
And that was great.
I mean, what a hip teacher, man. I mean, that's the hippest teacher I've ever heard of.
Well, it's wonderful, and because I had to practice, my father would have me set the timer every day, 45 minutes of practice, and it didn't mean sitting there improvising. And he was right. But after the 45 minutes of practice, I just put a book on the piano and read and play, almost an accompaniment. And just at the time, I could do 2 things: read and play. And I would just play. And that's how I got into it. And my ear is kind of primitive, but pretty good. And I don't read as well as I should, considering that I took lessons for 10 years. But I was in from the beginning. I was really, okay, I love this. This is wonderful. I want to learn how to make it work. And I got to be pretty good by the time I was 10, Or maybe earlier than that. But not with this sophisticated ear. You mentioned Ellington, like, those gorgeous voicings. My God. But the subtleties of those voicings back then escaped me. And only now, at 68, am I really finding my way into some of that. But when I saw Tom's band play, Tom and Mike and Randall Marsh and Tom Ledden, pretty soon they asked me to sit in one night, and I did, and I was in college on a break. And they said, just come back and sit in any time. And I did. And after a year of doing that, they said, why are you in college? And I agreed. And they were very good. Mike Campbell was a very, very good guitar player already. I think he was 20, 21. And he was extraordinarily good guitar player. And I was a fan who had followed them around. And I guess I was the right guy. For what was, whenever I would say, hey, I can't hear myself, or can I take a round? They go, you shouldn't have joined a guitar band. So it's for listening to the space. I mean, that's really good training. If you're going to be in a band that's a guitar band and you're a keyboard player, and it's like, no, they want a keyboard player. And they want you to do it. But you find a way to do it. And a lot of it is just listening. I've always loved to just listen.
Wait, can you just talk a little bit about, to me, there were cats like Joe Sample who would, he'd walk out of his home one morning and there'd be this big tent set up, and all the Holy Rollers would be, this was in Houston, this was in the wards in Texas, but I mean, it was so amazing that the sanctified, the preachers would come out that play guitars, banjo. It was an all-day event, and I just, as it relates to the blues, I mean, I would assume that Gainesville was pretty segregated town. I just wonder if Benmont Tench ever had a chance to. Would you go to? I remember Cyril Neville telling me that like his parents, I forget what denomination, but they took him to a church in New Orleans and they were speaking Latin, and it didn't get him off at all, and he had to. But he went to the Lasties Church, which is the Spirit Church in New Orleans, and the preacher had a drum kit on the stage and the rhythm coming out of there. I was wondering if you could talk about an experience you might have had with a sanctified church in the Gulf Coast in that Florida region.
I never went to a sanctified church. I grew up in North Central Florida in Gainesville,
right?
And it was very segregated, and it was simply segregated. They desegregated. I think the Civil Rights Act was when I was 10. So until I was 10, it was water fountains, waiting rooms, schools, everything. It was like two different civilizations, side by side, but mingling. But I didn't. I went to this First Presbyterian Church in Gainesville, Florida, and it was Presbyterian. It was the old hymn book. And those hymns are beautiful. But that's why I played, civil triads, because of that. But the organist, name was Willis, I can't remember his last name.
Yeah.
I want to say Willis O'Brien, but I think he was the animator on King Kong. But Willis, whoever it was, played organ, and he was astounding, and the way he would pull the stops to build the song and the voicing.
Oh, jeez.
And he was, he was a professor at the University of Florida, I think. So he wasn't just grabbing some sheet music and going, I'm just going to do this. He was a cat who was contributing, making it deeper. I still can't do that, but it took my breath away. I have not heard anybody do it quite like he did it. I have not, and I haven't been able to find any recordings of the guy. So this was the other end of it, but it was very, very deep. It was very, very deep. But I never went to a sanctified church.
I guess I'm saying like you, I just because Mudcrutch, I did a couple interviews. I don't know if you heard my interviews with Tom Ledden, but I know you guys did.
I did.
I got to send it to you.
God, I love Tom.
He's such a legendary cat. Bernie's brother, very, very underrated player. I mean, the idea is that like, did you feel like did you wind up? I know that. I know you would play psychedelic dungeons, but I wonder if like there was a Chitlin circuit or anyway, how did you infuse, to me, the blues? It's hard to play the blues if you're growing up in suburbia or even if you're learning out of a James Jamerson book. I mean, to me, it's like you got to be living that. I just wonder about your development of that blues aesthetic.
You just have to be in love with it.
I dig. I mean, this Miles Davis came from money, and he could play the blues. So I agree with you. Yeah,
you have to be in love with it. But the funny thing is, I was in Gainesville, Florida. Joe Tex was coming through town. James Brown came through town. Tom went to see James Brown, but like I said, Tom was a few years older than I was. And I guess there was a delivery of a package. Okay.
You want to take it? You can go do your thing. Do your thing if you have to.
It's fine. Tom went to see. No, you keep it in. I don't care.
Yeah.
Tom went to see James Brown. He told me later it was astounding. You could do all that, but I didn't. I was a little kid who was 10. I didn't even know how to buy a ticket to a show. The first big show I went to, other than just somebody playing in a dance, I was 17 when I saw Led Zeppelin at Boston Gardens with the MC5.
Oh my God, the MC5
on Led Zeppelin 2. And I was 17. So, but Tom, meanwhile, had seen everybody play, and Ledden had seen everybody too. But what happened to me was, my parents thought the schools in Gainesville, I think they thought two things. And the schools in Gainesville weren't the best. The high schools weren't as good as the education they wanted us to have, me and my sisters. And also, I think my father thought I'd get my ass kicked because I was just not a tough kid. So I didn't go to Gainesville High School, which actually is a great school. I went up north, sent me to boarding school. So I'm in New England in a boarding school.
Wow.
That's very diverse. I think it was fairly diverse, and it does have this scholarship programs. It's not all just rich kids, but there was a lot of the rich kids. But I get up to New Hampshire, to New England. For the town, this essentially, North Florida was pretty deep south. But I get up there at the time that the Paul Butterfield Blues Band has put out their first record. At the time that the John Mayall and Eric Clapton records come out.
Unbelievable.
At the time that these cats are talking in interviews in whatever there was, this is before Rolling Stone magazine or anything, they're talking about this guy Robert Johnson. And so I heard a guy named Manny Friedman, who was probably 16, with a gold top Les Paul, with a band of kids from the school. And I think they were all white kids. But he played Look Over Yonder's Wall, the Elmore James tune that the Butterfield Band also does. Sure. Now, I had never heard the Elmore James lyric. I was like, my God. And that had not happened to me since I first heard the Beatles. And the Beatles freaked me out. They were the first rock and roll that freaked me out, but they blew everything wide open into color. And when I heard the Elmore James lick, it wasn't just color, it was 3D. And so I had to chase down that.
Wow.
Where does that come from? And the first Led Zeppelin album came out shortly thereafter, and it was pretty scary. But because of Led Zeppelin's tendency to borrow, there were kids there who were hip enough. In this boarding school in New England, there were kids there who were hip enough to go, yeah, but that lick is derived from a Howlin' Wolf song. And they would play me No Place to Go. Because How Many More Years, I think it's the Led Zeppelin song, goes, bum, 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 bum. Howlin' Wolf's No Place to Go, I think, goes from bum, dum, 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 dum. He just doesn't, Willie Dixon or whoever it is, doesn't complete the phrase the way John Paul Jones does. But it comes from there. They're like, so Led Zeppelin learned from these guys, the Rolling Stones learned from these guys, and the Beatles learned from Little Richard. And all of this stuff, I learned all of this stuff in boarding school.
What was the name of the boarding school, by the way?
It was Phillips Exeter.
Oh my God! I used to. Oh, that's so beautiful. I cannot believe you were there in '69, man. That must have been. Yeah, it must have been a very avant-garde place, actually, at that time. I mean, I know
it was beautiful. I was there from '67 to '71, and that's where I learned so much music. I was already pretty good, but that's where I learned so much music. There was an art teacher who was furious at Creedence Clearwater. I really like Creedence Clearwater, and he was like, John Fogerty's just a rip-off of Little Richard. And I wasn't about to not like Creedence Clearwater, but it made me listen to Little Richard. Because Richard had his biggest hits when I was 3, so I didn't remember much of Little Richard. So he sent me to Little Richard, and he was also like, you listen to these records nowadays, forget it. He was from Philadelphia. He said, listen to the OJs. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
And a kid named Grover Coors, who was part of the Coors family from the beer, Grover Coors had a Vox Continental, and he was a pretty good player. And I remember talking to him. He was older than me. I kind of looked up to him. He probably didn't even know it. And I said, hey, I figured out the solo, Ray Manzarek solo, on the long version, the unedited version of Light My Fire. I got the whole thing down. And Grover looked at me with kind of like, not contempt, but just with bewilderment. It's like, you aren't supposed to learn the solo. You're supposed to make up your own. And I was 14 or 15, I think. And I'm like, oh. And it just opened everything up. Maybe I was a slow learner, but I was like, and from then on, it was like, okay, improvisational music, the blues is a really good base for improvisational music. If you really listen and pay attention, then you'll find that there's a real deep swing. And whether a bunch of kids in a boarding school can find that swing or not, a few of us could. And so I got all of this input, and at the same time, the beginnings of punk music were happening, the political punk like the MC5, the flat-out punk like the Stooges. And my best friend was from Detroit or Ann Arbor, and he brought all of that to my attention. The Beatles were putting out stellar work, like the White Album. And Dylan, who I had whose songs I liked more than I liked Dylan, though I had a greatest hits record.
And I mean, this is so. I'm just have a dream that like you and your buddies got in a car, wound up in Woodstock at the Joyous Lake, and saw Butterfield there. So, I mean, did you wind up?
I wish, but let me tell you.
Go ahead.
Let's make a long story short. I liked the Rolling Stones, but I wasn't deep into the Rolling Stones. I liked Bob Dylan's stuff, but I wasn't really like, I worshiped Bob Dylan. I'm walking by somebody's dorm room in the freezing cold, and I hear a record through the window, and I went in and knocked on his door and said, "What's that?" He said, "It's the new Bob Dylan record. It's called John Wesley Harding." And it was kind of like when I first heard the Elmore James lick.
Wow.
And so I got that. And Charlie, of course, bass playing on it, and Katie Buttrey's drums, but Charlie, of course, bass playing. Good God. And the
That's
same,
right.
I walked by the same dorm in the spring, that same year, I think. And I heard the Rolling Stones album out the window. And I went in and I said, "What's that?" I knew it was the Stones. Said it's a brand new Rolling Stones album. It's called Beggar's Banquet. The song's called Sympathy for the Devil. And I was like, hold it. And the Rolling Stones were doing kind of, I guess, a roots record. I don't know, somebody would try to call it that. It's just brilliant. And Bob was going back to the basics. And the air and the air of the music and the songwriting and the fact that that's a swinging rhythm section. Kenny Buttrey and Charlie McCoy with Bob. And Charlie Watts and Bill Wyman, or Charlie Watts and Keith Richards, is an astounding rhythm section with the Rolling Stones. And so this prep school is where I learned and fell in love with the true swing and learned that it was a separate thing. You don't just play and it happens unless you're sort of gifted. It's something that you should pay attention to and aspire to because it's incredibly important.
Where did even though he didn't fashion a keyboard player like Hendrix, where did he factor in for you in this? Billy Cox and those guys.
Listen, it's all music. So, everything's music. I've gone through phase. There was a point when I'd haunt art museums, and then I remember going to a gig and I was playing an improvised piece
Right.
in the middle of a long one called Melinda that was just me and Frody in the middle. And I looked at Campbell's shirt, and he had a polka dot shirt, and I was like following the polka dots and playing that rhythm. Everything is music. Everything is music. But guitar players like Hendrix, it's the melody and the swing. And I heard Hendrix, and I'm like, that's incredible. It sounds familiar. And I realized he had a lot of Curtis Mayfield in his playing, which is gorgeous. So you learn the melody thing. You learn the melodic sense. You learn the lyrical sense of somebody like Garcia. You learn just the howl and the soul of somebody like Robert Johnson. You apply all of that to whatever keyboard you're playing or whatever instrument you're playing. If it's Miles, if it's Tommy Dorsey, if it's Louis Armstrong, who started the whole damn thing off, as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely. Jelly Roll Morton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But even more than Jelly Roll Morton, it's like I listen to Louis Armstrong all the time.
You got to hit me to a couple albums. I mean, I love Louis to death. I mean, but I don't. Some of the albums sometimes like. I just want to get hip to the albums that really swing hard. Sometimes and Dixieland swings, but I just would love you to hit me to your favorite.
Dixieland's great because Dixieland is essentially the Rolling Thunder as you with clarinets.
Right.
But Satchmo Serenades is a really beautiful record. I have the 10-inch, and it's probably not as long as the CD.
Oh man,
which doesn't make the CD better. He sings Kiss to Build a Dream On, and he sings Not Your Cheating Heart. Maybe it's Your Cheating Heart or Your Cold, Cold Heart. I can't remember. He sings all these beautiful, beautiful songs. But he'll get to the solo, and the band will decide, we're going to swing. And he's just such a lovely vocalist as well. You can go back to box sets and hear the Hot 7, the Hot 5. You can also get into Django Reinhardt. But I'm actually the piano player who's in a rock and roll band who doesn't wish he was playing jazz on the side.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's always like, so when you play your own stuff, is it jazz? I'm like, no, actually it isn't. I really, really love rock and roll. But almost everything I love is derived from Black American music, except, Beethoven and Cezanne and Debussy and Chopin and Bach. My God, Bach. But apart from that, the stuff that I love is, you can find it somewhere in there. Bill Monroe had it in him somewhere. Hank Williams learned a lot of things from a black street musician named, I think, T-Todd, when he was really little. If everything that I play, I owe my house I live in to Black American music. I do, just flat out. And I owe the dance in my heart and my soul to Black American music.
I just, Benmont, can you, maybe you could just, I guess the thing I love is that the live music that I want to go see and heal from is cats that, it's not, they don't take themselves, they take what they do very seriously, but they don't take themselves that seriously. And then ultimately they're always going for it, meaning they're playing beyond what they know and they're okay with failure or hitting a clam. And I just wanted you to talk about how you developed, because I see a lot of people playing tentatively or in a formula trip mentality because they don't want to make a mistake, God forbid. And part of that has to do with all the damn technology that can make everything sound so perfect or sterile. But I just wanted you to talk about the idea of imperfection being perfection, and when that kind of crystallized and when you stopped really playing in fear, especially when it was your turn to solo.
Well, there's a couple of things. Stan Lynch said something really perceptive. He was talking about a guitar player in a really big classic rock band, classic rock now, they were huge, and probably still are. Yeah. Tour. But he was talking about somebody in an American rock band, and the guitarist, who I thought was good but wasn't like the top of my list, and he said, but the thing is, listen to him, he is playing to the exact end of his ability and trying to play beyond his ability with everything that he plays. And that's the thing. That's really important.
Why is it important?
Well, because you're striving, because you're growing, because you're learning. And it can be that you're doing your best to be unobtrusive. You're doing your best to create ambience.
Right.
You're doing your best to play, every time I did it, just to play that electric piano lick on Breakdown. You're doing your bloody best just to do that. You aren't just kind of going, oh, here it is. You're present, you're in the moment, you're committed. There's an actor who was in a Godard film called The Little Soldier, and there was an interview with him, and the interviewer said, you've been talking a lot about truth and reality, but you make your living as an actor and faking things. And he said, any really great actor, it's true. He's not faking a character. It's always true.
Oh, man.
And that's the thing with music. That's the thing with music. And you don't have to get on a high horse and intellectualize it and all of that. I mean, Lord knows Howlin' Wolf probably knew better than to intellectualize any of it. And he was not a dumb man by any account.
No, that's a very good point. He didn't, but I mean, those guys did not want, they talked about everything but music. When it was time to hit, they just hit. There was no intellectualizing of music.
Well, I mean, I love talking about music, obviously.
No, I mean, what I'm saying is like but
it's all communication. Music has to be communication, which is why I don't like. You can make great music with playing all the instruments yourself. McCartney's done it. Prince has done it. Lots of people have done it and can do it. But I live for the conversation. I live for it's a recording with live musicians on the floor. Yeah. And it's a conversation like a live thing will be. and the drummer will do something, and you'll react to it, and then the guitar player will react off of you, and the drummer will react off of that. And it can even be just a straight backbeat song, but there will be that alive feeling and the communication among people instead of just parts being played. Or a brilliant thing that happens off of what the drummer plays, but the drummer already did his part, so you can't hear what you're doing. And so that's it. I always want to track with as many people live as I can to replicate the live experience and to breathe, to be a breathing piece of music. Right?
Well, I mean, it's just, it's absolutely essential. And I was just interviewing the great engineer Russ Gary, and he did all those Creedence records, but I asked him about any jazz records, and he did a Cal Tjader record at Wally Heider's, and, you had Pete Escovedo on timbale, you had an African percussionist, Dick Burke on drums, upright bass, and they were all in a big, tight circle with a couple of mics. Yeah. It was the jazz guys love that natural leakage. They love being close to each other. To me, it was like the warmth and the sound of those recordings is incredible. I mean, putting the pandemic aside, I mean, can you just talk a little bit about, it's hard to put the pandemic aside, but I mean, how hard is it to, when you get calls and you're getting a good, chunk of money to do something, but it's like, I remember Don Randy, the great Wrecking Crew guy, the guy did so many records with all human bodies in there, like live, warm bodies. And, now they're like, come down, just, he plugs in his Fender Rhodes or whatever, does an overdub. They're like, great, you're done. See you later. It's just the anonymity of it. Do you make it a point to try to push people out of their comfort zone in order to collectively hit together if possible when you're recording live? I mean, when you're recording a studio album.
No. What I try to do is the best for the song. That's what I try to do, is fit the best for the song and the best to create an ensemble sound. And you can do the best for the song sometimes by stepping out in places, But I try to do the best for the song. And sometimes the best for the song is you put a fuzz pedal on the solo and you get it up screaming bloody loud. Where the solo comes for a solo, you just have the guitarist is tuning up and he slides his pick down the string and makes a scratching noise. You go, why don't you just do that for the whole solo? Sometimes it's that, and sometimes it's something that's smooth as silk. The song is the most essential thing. The song is the most essential thing, and treating the song right is the most essential thing.
I have another name that voice for you. Pay attention to the content, and we'll come back.
Okay, great.
The very first day that we had rehearsal in Macon, Georgia, was the day I started Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. Wow. And that got me into, and I'd always been into mythology. I mean, all the way through high school, all the Edith Hamilton and, Metamorphosis, the Roman guy, Ovid, yeah. And I read, all Greek and Roman mythology. That fascinated me. But Tolkien is the mythology of the 20th century, and The Lord of the Rings is the best of the best.
That's
so
right. Mm-hmm.
I read that, and I probably read it 20, 25 times since then, and seen the movies many times. And thank Peter, whatever his name is, for making that film. Those were incredible. But I turned Dwayne on to Tolkien. We used to go fishing when we'd have time off. We'd have an afternoon off. He and I'd just go find a lake somewhere and buy a couple of cheap rod and reels and sit on the side of the lake with plastic worms and talk. And and Dwayne was also an avid reader. He and I were the two readers in the band. And he was reading all kind of stuff, and I turned him on to Tolkien. And as you may know, his daughter's name is Galadriel.
Mr. Tench, you want to take a guess at who that is?
Well, I don't know. Is it Butch Trucks?
You're 1 for 2, man. Well done. The late great Butch Trucks, and I played that. Obviously, he was from the similar region, at least Florida-based.
Yeah. Oh, well, Tom used to see the Almond Brothers play when they were called the Almond Joys.
Of course, yeah, with Paul Hornsby. Yeah.
He said they had. He saw them play a dance somewhere. They were either called the Almond Joys or something else, the Hourglass. Or
the Hourglass, yeah, totally, yeah.
But maybe even before the Hourglass, they came out, Rubber Soul had just come out, and for the dance, they started out by playing Rubber Souls top to bottom. Just beautiful.
Oh, my God.
Simply beautifully. And he saw them several times, because they were from Daytona. Daytona's a couple hours drive, and then they sent it out of Macon. But I think they were from Daytona. I think much may have been from Jacksonville, which is a couple hours away from Gainesville.
Right. I'm sorry. I'm just lumping all the Florida together. But it's like, I mean, can you talk about?
Well, it's all close. That's all very close. Like those cities are all very close, and they intermingle a lot. And the bands that play one town or come from one town play the other. But thank you for playing that also, because you have like a southern voice saying, I was reading Ovid, I was reading this and that and the other. And it's like there's this belief, this complete belief that there's nobody smart in the South. There's nobody white that reads in the South. There's nobody white that's intelligent in the South. It's all a bunch of morons.
I refuse. That's one reason I do my show, is because there are just brilliant people everywhere, and the stereotyping sucks.
If you hear somebody say, "So I turned Dwayne on to it," it's like the accent doesn't matter. Your accent sounds funny to them.
Exactly, dude. Exactly, man.
That shit's so important. But yeah, that's really beautiful. And I agree with that.
No, I mean, I'm not the Lord of the Rings. You just sitting on the side of the riverbed, just talking about J.R. Tolkien. But I mean, Benmont, I wanted to ask you because, interviewing Larry Coryell and Michael Shreve and all these guys. I mean, they all saw their friends, and this was right at the time that your career really kicked into overdrive. I mean, early to mid 70s, they were seeing their friends. They were all roadkill. I mean, they were dying, overdosing drugs. And I just wanted you to talk, not that you and Tom were riffing, on mythology and books and stuff, but the idea is like, what has been a spiritual compass? Why are you still here? How have you been able to live a prosperous, productive life? And because, I mean, in some cases, music is the only thing for some people, and it can get very lonely and very dark sometimes. You've lived a full life, and I just wanted to know what your spiritual compass has been, if anything, through the years, just because I just know that your generation was searching for, they wanted to live, and I just wanted to know why you're still alive.
Every generation has searched for that in their own way, which is why people still read the Tao, why people still read the Bible, why people still follow the Buddha.
Yeah.
But in the 60s, 50s and 60s, it was big time with the beats and with the beginning of the heavy movement. But for me, I'm here. I'm blessed and fortunate because it was so lonely on the road, and I was such a shy human being who didn't know how to connect with girls or anybody. I was the only guy in a major rock band who got laid less than the people in the audience. I was just too shy. And so I'm in a room, and I'm filling a bottle every night, like a big bottle. You take the bottle of whatever there was backstage on the right, or Jack Daniels or Remy Martin back, and you sit in the hotel and listen to music, and between the bottle till you black out. And I woke up, we were in New York to do Saturday Night Live or something, stayed at the Omni Hotel. One day I woke up and I had just tied one on so bad the night before. I had embarrassed myself at the club. I think I had tried to slug Johnny Thunders from the other Heartbreakers. And I was a fan. I just got so drunk that it crossed the line.
Oh, my God.
And I was a big fan of his. And I woke up just feeling like hell. And the only thing that was at hand was there was a Bible, and it was the Gideons. I think it was the New International or Standard Revised. And I thought, I'm going to see if there's anything in here to help me. I turned to the Psalms, and I read some Psalms. And the Psalms gave me some grace. And I continued to drink and take lots of drugs, really heavily, until 1988. And I had periods where I would try, and then after like 6 weeks, I just fall hard off the wagon. And in 1988, I cleaned up and I got sober because Stan called me one day and said, hey, me and Henry could go down and just play at the studio coming down. And I had to say, Stan, I'm still too hungover and too drunk from the last 3 days to make it. And so I cleaned up. At the same time, I wrote a song that a guy named Fergal Sharkey wanted to cut because he'd had a hit overseas with another song of mine on his previous record. So I write this song. They want to cut it. I go down the song to cut the track. I can't cut the track on my own song. And later on, while I was in rehab, I think they called Mike Finnegan. Mike Finnegan cut.
Rest in peace. I can't believe this.
God, he was a genius.
Oh my God, dude! He had cleaned up. He had cleaned up before you.
Yeah, he got clean long before I did.
Yeah.
But so that for me, getting cleaned up and the experience with the songs, because I grew up in the Presbyterian church, going to Sunday school. Mm-hmm. It wasn't this like we hate gay people kind of a church, because gay people were beyond the pale in 1960, certainly in Gainesville, Florida. But it wasn't they didn't preach hate in the church.
I dig, man.
They didn't preach any kind of intolerance. You went to Sunday school and they sang that song, Jesus loves all the little children of the world, red or yellow, black or white, all precious in his sight. It's like that kind of thing. It's like, I didn't want him. And then I didn't attend, right? I didn't attend. But it always stayed in me that there's a basic truth in here somewhere. And when I got sober, I went looking for that truth in different places. In the Bible, in what's called the Old Testament by people who are Christian. And I'm the kind of Christian that, the fundamentalists and even the serious Christians would say it's been burned in hell, and the atheists would say I was a Bible thumper. It's like I just don't fit, but I know it's true in there. There's truth in there.
How do you lead? How do you lead your? I mean, I really love this, man. Tell me about it.
The truth isn't in Moses parting the waters, but there's truth behind it. But what it did is it led me to the Tao, and I'm alive and functioning because of the Tao, and I function best when I do my best to be with the Tao.
The Tao, you're saying the Tao.
The Tao Te Ching.
You understand that? I don't know how much you read about me, but I mean, my name's very Jewish. My mom is Catholic, and I never was bar mitzvahed, never confirmed. My first spiritual transmission, the mother of my children is Taiwanese, and so we have a very big Taiwanese community here in Tucson where I live, and I received the Tao 10 years ago, and it fundamentally changed my entire life. I can't believe you're dropping the Tao right now. I mean, it's like, it's your, trying to access your true nature,
Well, I knew that you were very focused on spirituality, which was one reason why when Lawrence said, Jake would like to talk to you, I'm like, man, that's beautiful. But the Tao, I realized, had been with me my whole life. Because the best things that had happened, yes, I practiced piano, and I practiced hard, and so on. And I was in college killing time hoping to find a rock band. I was in New Orleans. The rock band I found, the band, and I call it a rock band, but, rock and roll can be beautiful, beautiful music. It's lovely, sophisticated, moving, deep, and soulful. And I found that band. And I didn't force it. They said, come sit in the club one night. They were bored playing 5 sets a night. And so I grabbed my Farfisa organ, which is heavy as hell, and I'm going to take it in my mom's station wagon and go down and sit in with them. But I was a fan of theirs, and I would go see them play anyway. And I thought for a second, this was too heavy to put in the back of my mother's car. I just leave it there and just watch them play. And there's this split-second thing. It's like, just bring it. I was like, they just want you to come down because they're bored. Why bring it? And I just went, let's bring it. And they said, hey, you come back anytime you want. And I hadn't tried to force it. And when I try to force things, it ain't going to happen.
I'm honestly like so moved by this. I mean, because that's my habitual nature is to try to control too much, and that's what I'm trying to cultivate my true nature, which is exactly what you're talking about. It's just being in the flow and really, do you feel like is the Tao, can you talk about how the Tao connects to your Christian value or your Christianity?
Yeah. I don't know if you'd say that I even have Christianity.
Right.
That was my window into spirituality.
Wow.
That's the point of Christianity. I respect it, and I used to go to church out here because there was a beautiful, beautiful church with a fabulous preacher. And then when I had my daughter, it just came harder and harder. But you know what? I know one of your L's is leadership, right?
Yes.
The 4 L's that you have, love and leadership.
And life and lineage, yeah.
Yeah, and the Tao, Robert Hunter in Ripple says it, and it's from the Tao. You who choose to lead must follow, right?
Right.
And then it gets dark, but if you follow, you follow along. But that's the thing. It's letting go. It's non-action, and non-action isn't lying on your back, waiting for the phone to ring. It's something more subtle. It's hard to grasp. The Tao is something that you can't. If anybody isn't familiar, there are a million translations of the opening, but the gist of the opening of the Tao is the path that can be delineated is not the true path. The name that can be named is not the true name.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a million ways to say that. The literal translation of the character's actually is Tao Tao, no Tao. In other words, the way that you think is the way is not the way. The way that can be described is not the way. The way that people say turn right and go that way is not the way. So there's a way of just falling into it. At least that's what happened for me. I had heard of it about 25 years ago. I read Stephen Mitchell's not really translation, but interpretation, which is beautiful. And then I read Red Pines, and I read Jane English, and I can't remember who she read it with. And I read Lombardo and Addison, and all of these different translations bring different things out. And I started reading one in Italian when I was in Italy, stumbling through it. And this guy had an entirely different take that was really fascinating.
Really?
Like, that's wrong, but I'm going to, open my mind up to it. He thought, I don't remember what it was, but he thought that the opening of the Tao didn't mean what everybody else said it meant. And he had, some scholarly stuff to back him up. And, well, that's cool. So you can find it endlessly, but it gave me a way to let go and let God. There's a saying that God won't give you more than you can handle. And I talked to my sister, and I said, I'm going through a lot of stuff. And, I don't know if God is giving me more than I can handle. And she said, well, the truth, she had heard it, is that it isn't that God won't give you more than you can handle. God won't give you more than God can handle. And,
wow.
And so you follow the Tao, and the first thing the Tao says is, we can't tell you how to follow it, and as soon as you try to follow it, you've lost it.
It's so...
And it's not arcane. It's funny, it's smart, it's moving, it's sharp, it's very literal, and it gives directions to how to govern a people or a relationship or your own heart and how to live in a true fashion. And it's not some, snobbish above everything thing. Stephen Mitchell's translation of the Tao is a great way to get into it because he puts it into a context.
Yeah, no, I've been reading. I'll have to send you some passages of the reader that I just know that it's a way of life, and when I received it, all my habitual nature, all the things that used to hang me up, they're not gone completely, but a lot of it just fell away, and it's unexplainable. And the truth is that when I am my authentic self, when I am not caught up in the madness of guilt, shame, judgment, that kind of stuff, it's the most amazing feeling because you're not. There's no dogma. It's just really beautiful to hear how much you've poured into it, just because I have teachers and I love them dearly and they will always be my guarantors to the Tao. But coming from Taiwan, they have certain ways that they believe are ways that you cultivate, shining, polishing the lamps. And, the truth of the matter is, like, I just believe that there is no right way. I mean, I think that what I've been doing on my show, making connections, trying to bridge gaps, basically trying to create new history, doing it with you in this kind of free form way. I'm cultivating my true nature doing this, and there is no exact way to do it.
No, for me, the Tao, life, and sobriety, it's a river.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Where if you're a surfer, it's an ocean.
Right.
And there's a wave. For me, it's a river. And the parts of my life that were the most peaceful and made the most sense, even if one of my best friends died or anything, the river was carrying me. And at some points, and in my fairly recent past, and now I'm back, at some points I started deciding, no, the current shouldn't. It's taking me where I shouldn't go. I need to fight the current. I should swim over there. And then things aren't working in my life as well. And I'm unhappy. And that kind of thing happens. And in the last year, I came back and dove into the Tao again. And I'm back on the river now. And I just want to be on the river. I just want to be on that river. And the river will carry me. Doesn't mean that I don't have to kick my feet sometimes. Doesn't mean that I don't need to know how to keep my head above water. If I have a raft, then I don't need to keep the raft well lashed together. But I have to let it go. The interesting thing about the Tao, too, is, there's a tie into Confucius. I think they probably knew each other. But Jesus said, and I'm not a Bible thumper, trust me.
It's all right.
Jesus said, I am the light, I am the way. And the Tao is the way. And that's what it literally means, the path or the way.
Right.
It all goes together. It just all goes together. It really does. The best things just plain go together. And music is an elevating experience. Music is, when I'm playing my best, I go blind, and there's nothing but the music, or else there's sort of a peripheral vision of what's going on, and I'm entirely listening and feeling, and I'm submerged, and it's such a lovely thing. And I don't know what God is. I think there's something, but I don't think there's an old guy with a beard, kind of like sitting on a throne. And won't it be interesting if we all find out that that's exactly what there is?
Well, you know what? I just Benmont, man. Do you think we can do set 2 in a month or in a couple? I'd love to do set 2 because I just want to end. I feel so.
I'd love to.
This is just the most classic. I love the way you articulated that, and it's so important because the Tao is actually an incredible force for good in this time, and I people have to find it on their own or be intrigued by it, but it's like the ability for sustainability and humanity. It's like, I don't know, man. I couldn't do. It saved me. I mean, let's just put it that way. I mean, maybe I'd still be alive, but I wouldn't be. I'd be a shell of myself. I thank Lao Mu and the Tao for everything, really, and I just, it's amazing.
There are many forms of Taoism.
Yes.
And I just I read the book, and I float the river, and I read the book, and I float the river.
I just want to
And
stay
that's
on the
my-
river, man.
because
The river, man.
Taiwanese has different subsidies and different things, and I think there's some deep Chinese Taoism that goes somewhere else, but the basis is the same thing. The basis is the same thing, and I don't really know what I'm talking about, and I'm not really riffing. I mean, this is something that I've paid attention to that
Sure.
means a lot to me. And to just go back to your question about when did I lose fear of soloing,
Yeah.
I don't know if I ever did, but playing at a club called Margot with my friends Sean and Sarah Watkins, and she's playing the fiddle standing next to me, and when there's a solo, she flips the bow over and pokes me in the back. It's my turn to play. And I made up, and a lot of the time I have never played the song before. It's like, take it. And you lose your fear. You've got supportive people around you, and an audience is only there to go, they hope you'll make a mistake at Largo, not because they want you to fail, because they want you to see how you recover, or they want to know that you trust them, the audience, enough that you're willing to go out on a limb.
Benmont, Tench, I could hang for another hour, but I got to go pick up my older daughter
Me
right
too.
now. All right. We'll be in touch, man. It was such much love to you, man. Thank you for everything.
Much love to you too, Jake. This has been a real joy.
All right, dude. We'll do it again, man.
Okay, man.
Peace
Great.
and love.
Have a beautiful rest of your day.
All right, man. Peace. Bye.
Peace. Bye-bye.
Great show here on the Jake Feinberg Show today. Stephen Bernstein in hour one, and then Benmont Tench in hour two. And that's it for the Jake Feinberg Show. Grateful for your support and grateful for your attention. We'll see you soon.